So welcome everyone to our part 2 of this 3-part webinar series on ChatGPT hosted by the AECT divisions of STC, System Thinking and Change, LED, Learning Engagement and Division, and DELT, or DELT, the Division of Emerging Learning Technologies. So I do want to just take a second for each of the divisions to quickly introduce themselves and welcome you to today. So Vianne.
Okay, again, so thank you for being a part of our webinar series part 2. We are very excited to have you here as we delve deeper into our discussion on using ChatGPT for various areas today. We hope you find this session valuable. Thank you.
And Jin Joy.
Thank you, Vianne. Thank you, Anne. I'm Jin Joy Mao, associate professor from Wilkes University in Pennsylvania, and I'm excited to start this session 2 of our ChatGPT webinar series. Thank you to our outstanding presenters and also attendees. Look forward to this new session today.
Great, thank you. And Scott Gibbons could not be here today, our president for LED, but I am on the board, and on behalf of LED, we welcome you to this second webinar, where we're really excited to dive in a little bit deeper. In our first session, if you were not able to join that, we do have a recording of it, and we did do an overview of what exactly is ChatGPT and generative AI, and what are some use cases in education. So today we're going to dive in a little bit deeper and look at 6 different use cases. You will be able to choose 3 of them. And the way that this session is going to work is that you are going to first pick one, and you'll go out into a breakout room, and you'll spend some time with one of these 6 presenters to learn more about their particular use case for ChatGPT. Then we will come back to the main room and you'll have a chance to pick a second one. And then we'll come back to the main room and you'll have a chance to pick a third one. So all 6 of them are going to record their sessions. And when we send out the recording from this part 2 of the webinar, we are going to include all 6 presentations in there. So don't worry, if you really want to see all 6 of them, you get to. You just can't do them all right now at the same time today. So before we go into what each of these are, I do want to give you just a quick orientation around your screen. We are using the Zoom meeting platform. So if you, we have a limit on the number of participants that we can have in here. I don't think we've reached that, and I'm not sure that we will. But if you did get kicked out and you can't get back in, it's a possibility that we might reach our maximum, and you can always get the recording. You should be muted. If you're not, we will mute you, just so that you are not disturbing anyone accidentally. In the breakout rooms, if you have questions, you can raise your hand, or you can unmute to ask questions. You can also use the chat. You should see a chat button at the bottom of your screen as well. And when you go to your breakout room, whatever the chat is there is going to stay there. It's not going to come back to the main room. So we did ask our presenters that if you share a resource, that they're going to save that chat, and so that we can share out anything that anyone saves today. Now, we did enable live transcript, closed captioning in this Zoom meeting. So you should see a CC button at the bottom of your screen. You can turn on closed captioning. We've heard, though, that it does not work in breakout rooms. So we're not sure if that's going to be the case. However, if you are using Google Chrome, you can go into the settings and look at accessibility, and you can turn on closed captioning there, and it should provide a captioning window at the bottom of your screen. If you're in Windows 11, you can go to the accessibility features in your settings, and you can turn on closed captioning there. Or if you're on a Mac OS, then there is closed captioning in that system as well. So I apologize, we can't get it all set up in all of the breakout rooms, but that seems to be a limitation of Zoom right now. When we send out the recording, it will be captioned though. All right, so let me give you a quick overview of what is in each of these 6 presentations so you know which one to choose.
No, I'm garden.
So our first presenter is Heather Boyd. And Heather Boyd is a current PhD student at the School of Information Science and Learning Technologies at the University of Missouri. And in her session, she's going to explore how to leverage generative AI tools to create personalized study materials for learners. So with advancements in AI technology, it's now possible to create tailored content that meets individual learning needs and preferences. So she's going to discuss with you strategies and resources to make the study materials engaging and effective, including the use of multimedia, gamification, interactive elements. They will also explore how to gather data on students' learning progress and use that information to refine and improve the study materials. So you'll get some hands-on experience with engineering prompts and refining responses using AI generative tools.
Okay, so it looks like it's calmed down on people entering, so I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Heather Boyd. I'm a PhD student at the University of Missouri in the School of Information Science and Learning Technologies. And I'm also a learning technology specialist at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. So what I'm going to do, if we have time, is show you how to use a couple tools, ChatGPT and an extension for ChatGPT, to kind of ideate around some personalized learning materials for students. And then if we have time, I'll show you some of the multimedia tools that you can then use to kind of build off of the plans that you've been given by ChatGPT. So, as many of you know, students come to us with different needs, whether they have different learning preferences, varying levels of access, neurodivergencies, or other characteristics that impact their learning. Despite all that, they come to us and they expect to learn. So personalized learning materials can help students learn more effectively by providing them with materials that are tailored to individual needs. So what I'm proposing isn't necessarily a replacement for existing content, but these are things that might be beneficial for students who might be struggling with a particular topic. So for this activity, we're going to use ChatGPT and that extension Web ChatGPT. So I'm going to put these two things in the chat. And so those are in the chat now. So you have the link for ChatGPT and then a Chrome-based extension for Web ChatGPT. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen where I have both of these already open. Can everyone see that okay? Perfect. All right, so in this interface, you see ChatGPT and you see some tools that you might not be too familiar with. So what I've done is I have added this Web ChatGPT extension to my Chrome browser. When I did that, that's what activated these tools at the bottom. So we all know that ChatGPT, its data is based on September of 2021, so it's not too relevant. And we know that ChatGPT likes to make up sources. These are two of its flaws. This extension starts to address those two flaws. So what this extension does is basically gives ChatGPT access to the internet. So that's going to come into play here in a few minutes. Right now, we're going to play with just ChatGPT by itself. So I'm going to turn off the web access. So we can't do additional breakout rooms here. What I'm going to do is just demonstrate how we can use these two tools to help generate personalized learning materials for students. And I'm providing a link in the chat to a Google Doc. And within that Google Doc are 4 fictional student profiles. I just made these up. So you probably don't have this amount of detailed information about your students, but it might be fun at the beginning of a semester to kind of do a survey or an assignment where you get to know the students and you can just kind of keep a profile on hand if you need it later on down the road. So moving over to ChatGPT, the best way that I've found to interact with this tool is to ask it to assume a persona. And then once I have it assume that persona, I'm going to give it some information to review, and we're going to start digging into that information. So I'm going to copy and paste a prompt that I've created. And I'm telling it, you're an expert in personalized learning and learning strategies for college students. I'm going to give you a student profile, and once you've read the profile, state read. And I'm going to copy and paste one of those student profiles. So if you're in the Google Doc, I'm copying profile 3. And I'm going to paste that in. So there's my prompt. Here's my profile. This is a 19-year-old student studying biology. She's a really kinesthetic person. She likes outdoor activities. She's on the school soccer team. Okay, cool. Let's put that in. Read. Okay. At this point, sometimes ChatGPT will go ahead and start writing a personalized learning plan for you for that student. If it doesn't, we have a backup prompt to put in. So in this backup prompt, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be very, very, very specific about what I want. And I'm going to remind it that it needs to stay in persona. So as a personalized learning expert, we're going to keep it in the same persona here, because sometimes it'll default back to regular old ChatGPT and it's like, nope, didn't want that. Okay, so based on that, what type of personalized study materials would you recommend as being most beneficial for the student's learning based on the profile? And then I tell it, take into consideration all aspects of the profile. And then I just list off all the aspects. All right, let's see what it gives us. Okay. So based on the student's profile, it recommends hands-on lab activities, real-life examples or case studies, visual or interactive materials, field trips or outdoor learning, collaborative learning opportunities, audiovisual resources. And then it notes that the student has dyslexia, so we need to take that into account and make sure we meet any accommodations that are needed. So from here, this gives us kind of an outline, and it's like, okay, well, what specific strategies can I give to this student? She's studying biogeography. What are some like field trips or outdoor things she can do on her own to kind of interact with this material a little more? So I'm going to ask it. Okay. So it's giving me a few ideas here. All right, that's still kind of generic. I want to be specific. So let's say the student lives in Chattanooga. All right, are there any hiking areas or nature walks in Chattanooga that might be good for her? Well, we know ChatGPT on its own is going to give us flawed information here. So this is where we're going to turn on web access. So I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to bump this up. You can have it do as many internet search results as you want, or pull from as many internet search results as you want. I'm going to put it on 10. I found that to be pretty good. Anytime, any region, all of these defaults are good. So we'll just go ahead and say, are there any places in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where the student could go on a hike or a nature walk? See what it gives us. So you see, while it's kind of generating down here, what that extension did is it took my query and it found some links that it thought were pertinent to that query, and it's pulling them in. And so ChatGPT is using the links that it's pulling in to kind of give me some suggestions. Okay, and it gave me some good ones. Riverview Park in North Chattanooga, South Chickamauga Creek Greenway, and Lookout Mountain. These are 3 really great places in Chattanooga to go and look at biogeography. So let's say I wanted her to go to the South Chickamauga Creek Greenway. I'm going to have it create some questions for the student to use when visiting the South Chickamauga Creek Greenway relative to biogeography. Okay, let's see. All right, so there you go. Student, go to South Chickamauga Creek Greenway. Here are some great questions for you to dig into. What plant species are you seeing? Are there any unique or rare plant species? How does the presence of water in the form of the creek influence diversity of animal and plant species? So put this in a Google Doc, a Word doc, print it off, give it to the student. That's a great way for them to kind of start engaging with that particular topic. All right, so I've done a lot of talking just myself. So I'm going to pause and let you guys ask me some questions and we can dive into any tools that you guys are interested in.
Hey, Heather, may I ask a question? I'm Victor.
Yeah.
So I see that the web access piece, is it like once you open up both the web, the extension and then the web GPT, then the connections will be automatic, or there's some connections needs to be done?
Yeah, so once you add here, I'm going to remove it from Chrome, but once you go to this website and add this to Chrome, it's there. And it's going to actually open up a new tab and you'll see that it automatically adds those to the bottom for you. So there's nothing more you have to do.
Yeah, excellent. I have seen another tool called Perplexity, which is quite similar, but it can also connect to other databases. So I see the similar technology has been implemented, but maybe in other websites.
That's cool. I'll have to play with those.
Yeah, perplexity.ai.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
Heather, so can you explain web access just one more time and the reason to have it on or off?
Yeah, so I turn it on specifically when I need resources from the internet.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm turning it off because it starts to kind of confound things a little bit. But if I know I want resources and I want them to be accurate, like location, or if I want a link to a podcast or a link to a journal, then I turn it on. So I think I've got from a previous, this is from my last session. So we put in the student profile about the student studying psychology in Vygotsky. And I turned it on and it gave me a link to a podcast about Vygotsky.
Hey, can you put that in the chat?
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, so it's
brilliant.
Yeah, it's really cool. And there's the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I listen to it without an Apple though? Wait a minute.
Oh, it's probably on other devices. Any other questions? I know we're probably about to wrap up.
So just in case we can get it, I don't think it can prevent hallucinations, right? It's just adding stuff.
Right. It's not going to prevent hallucinations, but it's going to reduce the likelihood if you're pulling for specific resources.
Okay, thank you.
Hallucinations?
Yeah, so that's the term when ChatGPT gives you incorrect information.
Fake information.
Yeah, fake.
Thank you, Victor. I'm learning a new language.
Thank you, Heather. It was very
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chelsie session. We have Chelsie Dubay, who is an experienced instructional designer and educator with over 15 years in the field. Currently, she serves as the Director of Instructional Design and Clinical Instructor at East Tennessee State University's Department of Computing. In her session, she is going to use this acronym CLEAR to guide you in evaluating and refining prompts based on their clarity. The C is for clarity, the alignment with learning objectives, engagement, appropriateness, and relevance to the instructional design project. So you'll have some interactive activities there, and you'll work collaboratively to create effective and engaging learning prompts, leveraging the power of generative AI tools.
All right, so today we're going to talk about generating clear learning prompts. And one of the things that I always like to do is really define what we're doing, where we're going, and where we hope to end up. So at the end of this, I hope that you and I can come to a shared understanding about what a learning prompt is, or what I consider one to be. We'll cover the steps of what I've created as the CLEAR framework. I'll walk you through how I've applied the CLEAR framework to a learning problem that I've encountered. And then we'll work together to apply the CLEAR framework to a new learning problem. And then at the end, I'll share with you some resources so that we can stay in touch and continue to collaborate. Okay, first things first, a learning prompt. A learning prompt is any information that you type into ChatGPT or any other generative AI tool in hopes of getting something back that's going to resolve or respond to or answer to a learning problem that you've identified. I've attended a lot of sessions on AI technologies, and one of the best analogies that I have heard in those sessions is that AI is a co-pilot. I know that there's a lot of talk and discussion about what is AI, how is it going to take over? Are there going to be areas or opportunities where it kind of transcends what we can do or what human interference is needed? But AI is truly a co-pilot. There's nothing really, at least in my opinion, that is in final draft capacity or final form when you're getting information back out of AI programs like ChatGPT. It's also iterative. I like to think of some of my interactions with creating and refining learning prompts as conversations, because they're continuously being refined. I'm continuously trying to improve the responses and output that I'm receiving. I'm continuously trying to train ChatGPT on what my preferences and expectations are. And so as we're going through this today, I want you to think of both this acronym, this process, as your co-pilot, and this entire process of using these types of tools as iterative and ongoing conversations. Okay, so just to hop right in, I've created the CLEAR framework. It has 5 different steps for you to consider what and how you can work to refine the information that you're inputting into one of these systems so that the output is going to be what you expect, anticipate, or need for a given problem. The first step is to really get clear on what it is that you are needing. It always helps to have some sort of specific and clear goal in mind. So for example, maybe you have been confronted with a learning problem in one of your classes or in a class that you're helping an instructor with, and it could go several ways, but you need to get very specific on the single learning problem that you are working to resolve. And then you have to welcome in the logistics. And this is going to include anything that you need to think about that needs to be entertained or answered to inside of that learning problem. So for the purpose of our project today, we're going to talk about some assignment guidelines. We're going to talk about what kind of activities that the students are going to be completing. We're going to talk about and include what the expectations are of their performance. How will they demonstrate mastery back to us? How will we know or ensure that they have reached some sort of knowledge transfer? So we'll talk about working out the logistics of those as well. It's possible that you have noticed or saw something that you liked in a different setting, and you want to borrow that or extend or expand on that. You can input in examples of what you would like to see, as well as what you would not like to see, what you want ChatGPT to avoid altogether. And then we need to really get clear on who is the audience, who is that target population that's going to receive this learning content. And we need to be mindful of what their needs are, what their characteristics are, what kind of existing knowledge are they coming in with, and what are the expectations you have of your learning population. And then, of course, the magic really happens in this R of the framework, which is that refinement. So you're continuously going to provide the platform with constructive feedback. Maybe you have some vocabulary tweaks. Maybe you have some other specifications. Anything that you use to really nail down a particular output, that's going to optimize whatever you're receiving out of a particular platform. So let's look at what this looks like in practice, at least for me, if we're applying the CLEAR framework to a learning prompt in a generative AI platform. So the scenario that I first encountered was I was assigned to teach a graduate level research methods class. It's a class in our Department of Computing, and in that department, we have students who are highly technical in computing and computer science, and we also have our information systems students who may have come into the field through the business side of things. Maybe they're in a less technical lane. Regardless of where the students came from or what their background in research and writing is, I needed to help them locate, read, and interpret scholarly articles, because one of the culminating projects of this class is that they're going to construct a literature review that they could then work to roll into a thesis or other capstone project. So I reviewed all of the materials that I was given, and I realized that students are doing a considerable amount of writing. They're really talking and getting down in the weeds about grammar, clarity, structure, all of that good stuff. And that is all well and good. That is very, very important. But it left very, very little in terms of the research or methods that this class was supposed to be covering. So the students needed some opportunities to provide opportunities to summarize sources, synthesize, look at and identify emerging themes that have come up. And honestly, I got in there and realized that students didn't necessarily know how to navigate a journal article at all. I think we've all read a journal article where we've completed reading it and then looked back and maybe you've blacked out for a second because you couldn't even recall what it said. So I wanted to create some sort of interactive lesson to make it easy for my students to find and understand scholarly articles in a way that they could present them in either a presentation or combine them in their lit review. So what that looked like for me was I had to kind of go through those steps. I had to get very clear on what I wanted to target, because sometimes when you're going in and you have a class, you can't save the world in one semester. You have to pick one or two components of that course to really refine or improve. And so for me, I really wanted to look at this dissection of reading and synthesizing scholarly articles. But of course, I needed them to find scholarly articles, and I needed for them to know that Google isn't always the best source. They've got to either go to the library resources, or they at least have to go to Google Scholar. So I needed for them to locate, read, and interpret the articles. And my goal as the instructor is I needed it to be hands-on. I wanted them to do something very active. I didn't want them to listen to me spiel on about going to the library or using keywords. I then needed to figure out how I was going to deliver this. What was it going to look like for my students so that I could really refine that prompt in ChatGPT to give me some of the information that I needed. So I knew that I wanted some sort of interactive lesson. I knew that I wanted to weave a case study throughout, because students really seem to connect if you contextualize the material in a way that they can find some common ground. And I needed also guidelines and a grading rubric. I already had the grammar grads, as I had said. I knew that my audience was grad students with and without a technical computing background. And so here's what it looked like. So the first prompt that I entered into ChatGPT was, I just essentially said, create an activity for students to locate journal articles and present them. It was pretty straightforward. And as you could see, it did not give me what I needed. So I went back and I said, okay, I've got to get clear on what I'm asking it to do and what it's giving me. Because, ChatGPT is a lot like a computer. It's going to give you exactly what you tell it to. So I went, and in the second prompt, I refined it to enter in this information that you see down below this, create an interactive activity for graduate level research methods course in computing where the students locate, read, and you can read through that. But if you notice here, I was very, very specific. I got clear on what I wanted it to generate for me, and I got clear on who it was generating it for, so that ChatGPT knew the audience that was receiving it as well as the audience that was delivering it. I got clear on the logistics that needed to be incorporated in there. So making sure that my case study represented diverse populations, making sure that I accounted for these different things. And then it generated a lesson that I could work with. It helped me contextualize what this interactive lesson was going to look like. And I used Articulate Rise to create the lesson. But what it didn't do was give me the case study. It just briefly mentioned the case study. So because it is iterative, because you can refer back to previous points in the conversation that you've had with ChatGPT, I said, okay, that's great. I love it so far. But I simply typed in, build out the case study. And it did. So it gave me characters that represented diverse populations. It presented essentially a storyline of a Department of Computing research project that needed to gather some sources for the benefit.
I think you can keep going.
Oh my gosh.
That was quick. So I think you can keep going is what she says, and people can just drop in and out, right?
Huh?
I think you just keep going, can't you? You don't have to
I don't know. I think I have to start over.
No, she said you drop back in, or we can change.
I don't know. I thought I was going to give it 3 times, and obviously the first time was not my optimal build.
All right, I'll be quiet this.
All right, well, let's jump on in and get started, and we'll restart, or I don't know. You know what? We're going to restart. Or how many people joined us from the last time? I don't know. I don't even know if, okay, I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to restart and go through it a little bit quicker because as you can see, I can be a little bit long-winded. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's try this again. Let's see in the chat. Okay. I'm new. Okay. All right. Well, to my new people, welcome. To the folks that returned, welcome back. I'm going to try to do this a little bit quicker. All right. So here we go. I've created a framework that helps you refine prompts in generative AI platforms to help you get to the heart of solving a learning problem. And so the first thing that we're going to do today is define what a learning problem is, what a learning prompt is, and how it can solve your learning problem. I'm going to walk through the steps of the CLEAR framework. I'm going to apply the CLEAR framework to a scenario, and then hopefully we're going to work collaboratively to apply the CLEAR framework to another scenario. And then at the end, I'll give you some resources. So I'm already doing a lot better, or I'm faster anyways. Okay, a learning prompt is any text that you're going to input into one of these generative AI tools. You can take your pick on whichever one that you want to use. I use ChatGPT, the free version. And so what I mean by learning prompt is the actual text that you input in. And I like to think of ChatGPT as a conversation. It's iterative, it's cyclical. And so I'm constantly refining and going back and referring to previous information that I have either given it or that it has outputted, and I am needing to tweak it. So I am constantly evolving how I'm training this model to deliver what it is that I'm expecting and wanting and needing. And so in that lane, it's my co-pilot. It's not driving the plane. I'm driving the plane. It's just helping me with some navigation, telling me a heads up about turbulence, all of that good stuff. So let's jump into the framework. The CLEAR framework has 5 steps, and each of the steps is going to highlight a consideration that will help you really get clear on what it is that you're asking one of these generative AI platforms so that it can give you or output information that's going to satisfy your need or help you answer your learning goal. So first step, clarity. You have to get clear on what it is you need. Just like students when are picking research topics, you start broad and then you funnel in and really get clear and specific about what specifically you are wanting to study. This is no different. You need to get clear and specific on what it is that you're asking ChatGPT or this other tool to generate and have a goal in mind. Next, you want to think about some of the logistics. You want to include any sort of practical considerations. This is going to include assignment guidelines, paper details, what kind of citation style you're expecting, what kind of modality that you're going to accept those evidences of student mastery for. You need to include all of that and build it in to the logistics, all those details. If you have some examples of things that you've seen in other areas of what you would love to either replicate, extend, or expand upon, as well as things that you want it to avoid completely. Maybe there are certain terms in your field that are just absolutely on the no-no list. Maybe they are antiquated or outdated in some way, or you want to really avoid going down a particular rabbit hole with your students. It's all, the more you give, the more examples that you give ChatGPT of what to do and what not to do, the more refined that your output is going to be. And then who's this for? Is this for a graduate level writing class? Is this for an undergraduate lower level, like first time freshman college orientation class? The audience is imperative because you need to really think about their characteristics, their needs, what they're coming in with in terms of incoming knowledge, and what your expectation is of them. And then in this refinement process, you're going to continuously provide constructive feedback to the AI platform to refine its output. You need to think about those vocabulary considerations, how you're going to optimize or change or tweak the output that it's already given you. So let's see what this looks like in practice. So I was asked to teach a research methods course, and in that course, it was a heavy focus on writing mechanics, grammar, improving your writing structure, all of that good stuff, and citation styles. And that is all well and good, and I loved it, and I loved all of it. But what wasn't in the class was any research methods. And so I needed the students to get some practical hands-on experience researching, gathering sources, reading sources, synthesizing sources, and then we can also write about them, of course, and present about them. Because the culminating project for this class is this high-quality lit review that's going to hopefully expand into a thesis project. And so what I needed to do was I needed to get clear specifically on what I wanted ChatGPT to give me. And so I wanted an interactive lesson where students had to locate, read, and interpret scholarly articles. And then my goal as the instructor was to give them that hands-on practice. It wasn't going to be this passive learning opportunity. I wanted it to be web-based, and I knew in terms of logistics, I wanted to contextualize it in a case study. You know, I've performed a lot of research on approachability of STEM classes, and I wanted to make sure that each of the students that are in my class could see themselves inside of this practice. I wanted to add knowledge checks. I wanted to add activities, some sort of writing or presentation, and then I needed something to help me assess the work, the mastery, so a presentation grading rubric. I inputted in the grammar guides, the presentation guides, and lit review examples. And I told them specifically that the audience was graduate students with and without technical backgrounds. So let's see what I got. So the first prompt I have here on the top left-hand side of your screen was very, very short and to the point. Create an activity for students. I needed them to locate and then present journal articles. It didn't give me what I wanted. So I got a little bit more detailed and a little bit more granular in the specific things I wanted it to include. And it included all of those things. It included interactive activities. It included knowledge checks, practice, final exam, rubrics, all that, or final knowledge checks and rubrics. Perfect. Loved it. What it didn't do was build out the case study. It mentioned briefly the case study almost in passing as an afterthought. So I went back and I literally typed in, build out the case study. And so it did. And so it gave me characters that represented diverse audiences, and they walked through the process of collecting information for finance cybersecurity considerations. I said, great, go even further. You have broken down the interactive activity into 3 modules. That's great. I need you to create 3 different knowledge checks with 3 multiple choice questions each. And it did. And then I wanted to refine the presentation assignment. So in the final prompt, I said, okay, create the presentation assignment. I want to make sure that all of this stuff gets in there together. I need the presentation to be 5 to 7 minutes. I need the slide count to be 5. And I need the presentation to follow best practices of the rubric example that I had provided earlier. And that's what it did. And so I was able to really get very clear on where ChatGPT and the breakdown in communication was happening. And I could go back, reiterate, and refine that process.
The next session you can choose from is with Mike Frazier. Mike is a PhD student in educational studies at The Ohio State University and is a member of the Research Laboratory for Digital Learning. And he is going to walk you through some brief tips for prompt engineering based on best practices from OpenAI and latest research from academics studying prompt engineering, followed by an interactive demonstration of an intelligent tutoring prompt that can be used with your students to help personalize their understanding of a difficult concept in your field. So one issue that AI has the potential to address is the lack of personalization in learning. So students and instructors all over the world are using ChatGPT to address a previous issue that has now dropped the learner in the pilot seat. So you're going to learn how to leverage this in your own classes. He's going to talk a little bit too about the differences in the ChatGPT versions, as well as discussing responsible and ethical use of generative AI.
Right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Mike Frazier. I am a former high school English teacher and a current PhD student in learning technologies at Ohio State University. Through the Writing Across the Curriculum program, I also help to coach the teaching of writing here at Ohio State. So it's been an interesting ride these past several months with all the things happening with generative AI. But one of the things that I've always tried to do as an instructor is try as much as possible to personalize learning for my students, because that's the most effective way, I think, to learn. So with all of the things happening with ChatGPT and generative AI in the past several months, and like every day it's a new thing. Some days I'm just like, I can't even read the news today. And so I for this session, I really want to focus on like one single entry point as an example for ChatGPT. And the best way to learn about how to use it is to use it. And when I first heard about it, I was reading an article. I found an article about like the death of the high school English essay. And then later there was one about the death of the college essay. And I was like, oh, geez. So I pulled up ChatGPT and I was like, okay, what's this thing? What can it do for me? And I started testing it out and looking around, seeing what it could do. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. I think it could do some things for me. But I'm a teacher at heart, so I wanted to know, what can this thing do for my students? And so I wanted to get back to that personalization aspect. So I asked ChatGPT yesterday, and this was the GPT-4 version to be clear, what are the primary aspects of an effective ChatGPT prompt that would help a user identify an effective and personalized analogy to understand a difficult concept? I got this idea because I teach an undergraduate course in learning and motivation strategies, and we were talking about the information processing theory model. And a traditional activity I had those students do was work in groups to come up with an analogy for the information processing theory model. And this past spring, we had been talking about ChatGPT and using it. And one of the groups said, okay, well, yeah, Mike, we came up with an analogy. Well, ChatGPT helped us come up with this analogy. We wanted a sports analogy because we're all into sports. And so it came up with this analogy about, football, and like, okay, so the quarterback starts with the sensory input, right? He's, doing whatever quarterbacks do with their hands and eyes and whatever. He gets the ball, right? And then he's scanning, right? Working memory. He's looking at the field and what's going on. And then he throws the ball. The wide receiver catches it, or whoever. It's stored in long-term memory, touchdown. And that was the end of ChatGPT's analogy. And I was like, well, hold on a second. That's not all of the information processing theory model, right? Because you have to retrieve that information later, right? Back to your working memory. So how does the quarterback get the ball back? And he's like, oh, well, that's a good point. So I said, okay, let's go back to ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT, what are the limitations of the analogy that you just gave me? And it gave us a list, and that was one of the things that it missed that part, which I thought was really interesting. And so that's led to all of this that you're about to see. So this is what I asked ChatGPT yesterday. And these are the answers that it gave me immediately. And all of these look pretty good to me based on my experience using ChatGPT and researching it for pretty much every day for the past several months. The first thing is, the higher quality your inputs are, the higher quality the outputs are going to be. So one way to ensure that is to be specific. So the more specific your request is, the better the AI's response will be. So instead of asking something like, what is quantum physics? You could get more specific. can you explain quantum entanglement, specific concept within there, using a music-related analogy if you're into music? Give it some more context. So along with both of these here, the more constraints you're able to give the AI, the higher quality the outputs are going to be. So give it some context. If you have an interest, a specific interest or a hobby, you can ask it to include that. So I love baking. Can you explain the concept of blockchain using a baking related analogy? Another thing you can do is tell it what you know already, or tell it, the areas that you don't totally understand yet that you need help with. If you're a complete beginner, I don't know anything about coding, right? Can you explain Python programming and how it works using a gardening analogy? It can do that. If you know some, you can tell it what you know and then what you still want to know, and that can be helpful too. And then if you ask it to explain something and you're like, this doesn't make any sense, then you can ask for a clarifying question, right? That doesn't quite make sense to me. Can you explain it to me as if I were, a fifth grader or a high schooler, right? Or an undergraduate student, or someone who doesn't know anything about coding, right? So it's an iterative process. And this leads to our next one, breaking down complex concepts. So number 4 and number 5 here are related to a concept called prompt chaining, a prompt chaining technique. And there was a study done, and this is available, I think, in OpenAI's GPT-4 API documentation. There was a research study done that found if you give ChatGPT a really complex problem in one single prompt, its accuracy rates in the output and solving that prompt are about 16, 17%, something like that. I think it was like less than 20. And then if you break it down into multiple prompts by chaining your prompts, or ask it to break it down into multiple steps, the accuracy in it solving that complex problem went up to like 96, 97%. So break it down. The more you can break it down for the AI, the more likely it will be to give you an accurate answer. Asking open-ended questions, telling it to use creativity, whatever that means for an AI, or to make assumptions if you need to, things like that. How would you describe the concept of neural networks to a child using a story about animals? It's likely to give you a pretty good answer. And I will note also that I found that this one probably works a little bit better for GPT-4 than GPT 3.5. And then another thing that GPT-4 does a little bit better is knowing that you're probably going to want an example of this whole list that it just gave you. 3.5 tends to not do this unless you prompt it, right? So I'd have to this is probably what GPT 3.5 would give me. And then I would say, okay, can you give me an example now of an effective prompt? But 4.0 just went ahead and did that for me. I'm a medical student and I love basketball. I'm having a hard time understanding the Krebs cycle. Could you explain it to me as if it's a basketball game? So there's a good example. You could try that out. And so now that we have some understandings of what ChatGPT thinks would be an effective ChatGPT prompt for this particular task, let's give it a try. If you are able to, if you have access to ChatGPT, you can go ahead and open it up. If you don't, you can sign up for a free account or log in for free with your Google account. Or I think there's probably another option too. And so the first thing here, it's a sort of like simple point of entry, identify a difficult concept within your field, maybe that students tend to struggle with a lot. And then just start test it out, right? Start using ChatGPT to develop and iterate your own prompt that you might be able to say, hey, and give it to your students and say, hey, plug in, an interest that you have here, your current level of understanding with this difficult concept, and use ChatGPT as an intelligent tutor. So you can clearly define your current level of understanding, the concept that you're interested in, and then just give it more context. The more context you can give it, the more specific you can be, the better. And I put that example that it gave us back up there in that box. And another tip that I have is remember that it's an iterative process. There's no magic prompt that you can just give it and then it'll just give everything you need. So going back and forth with the bot is the best way to get what you need, usually. So one way you can do that is to ask ChatGPT to evaluate your prompt or to evaluate the prompt that it puts out. to point out and revise potential weaknesses. It's usually able to do that, or to critique the prompt, and or maybe even to ask what further information it needs to help you understand that concept. All right, so we've got, I think, about 5 minutes or so. Take a few minutes, try this out, and in the meantime, feel free to hop on the mic, ask any questions you have, or type them out into the chat, or feel free to share a prompt that you came up with, and maybe how it went, or any questions you have about it. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you, Jinjoy. Times like this, as an instructor, I just wish we could be in the room and I could be like walking around like, hey, what are you working on? It's okay. Sorry. But feel free to share if you're working through things.
Maybe you can type what question you put in the asked it in the chat. It'd be interesting to see what everyone's asking.
Since I came back, I could tell you. So I cheated. I played and then came back. So students have a really hard time with strategic management, strategic planning, and operations management, especially when they come into a nonprofit class versus the for-profit classes. And we use the terms a little bit differently. And so I asked it to do it. My first prompt was compare and contrast strategic management and strategic planning. And so it gave me a whole bunch of stuff, the focus, the scope, flexibility, decision-making, which I thought was really cool that they did this decision-making. Then I said, evaluate your answer. And of course, it kept saying, upon evaluating my previous answer, I find it to be comprehensive and accurate. So it likes to say that response, just an FYI. However, it's important to note that the evaluation of my answer is subjective and based on my own assessment. I then said, how do I better explain this to a 21-year-old college? He said, sure, or it said, sure. Here's a simplified explanation of strategic planning that might be easier for a 21-year-old college student to understand. So it then reevaluated that. I said, what role does operations management play? Gave me a whole bunch of really big terms and whatnot. I said, okay, could you make it so a 19-year-old could understand this? And so then turned around, simplified it, and said, absolutely, here's a simplified explanation of the role of operations management. So 19-year-old college student can understand it. Then I said, what would be analogies that a college student might help a college student better understand these terms? So it used planning a road trip, building a puzzle, for strategic management, conducting a symphony, playing a game of chess, which I thought were really good. Not bad. But what's fun for me is I use team-based learning, Mike, and everybody else. So I would have the students do this. I would quit and say, okay, what's the next question? Did you understand that? If not, what would you say? And so the teams would then do a competition to find, and I'll say, don't use the first analogy, because the first team I call on, they're going to use that analogy, so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Annetta, for sharing
Yeah.
all of that. Yeah, and what you were just talking about is a great example of the chain prompting technique. And
Okay.
so, yeah, so using what we know is best practice as instructors or for our learners is still the subject matter experts, right? Is what we are.
I think it's fun because it teaches them how to use this tool more effectively. This tool is not going to go away. It's just like the internet. How do we teach them to evaluate, critically think about the sites they go to? Did they pass the crap test or not? And if they don't pass the crap test, well, the ChatGPT is going to be doing that too. I think a lot of us have noticed it's very surface to begin with. So what your chaining is doing is actually getting it more specific, which I like because I suck at that part myself. So yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing.
No problem.
And Robert, thank you as well. And I see what you did in your prompt is you started out with you're a subject matter expert in higher education policy, which is also a great technique for prompting. Tell it to act as a particular role. So that's a good one. There have been some leaks of personal information. Write a statement in official nomenclature. Sometimes you might need to define that for the AI. Oh, okay. We have a warning this time. Good. I have 50 seconds. I included at least 10 rules that are to govern faculty when securing their instructional videos. Yeah. So thanks, Robert, for sharing that. You've got very specific things in there. And you'll find when you test that, you probably have already found it, but when you test a prompt like this, it might not understand particular aspects, especially GPT 3.5 compared to 4. But yes, that's a great example of a prompt that would be a great starting point. So thanks, everyone.
And Mike, thank you for telling us about how to make 3.5 work.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're welcome. And extension, if you want, there it is. Further reading, Ethan Mollick is a great name to follow on LinkedIn if you're looking for more.
Another session you can choose from is with Vianne Greek. And Vianne Greek is a doctoral student in instructional design and technology at Virginia Tech. And she is going to talk to you about several ways of using ChatGPT to brainstorm, learn new concepts, assist with research, all the ways that you can use it. So you're going to learn how to ask open-ended questions and get creative responses that can help you generate new ideas for writing, for projects, for presentations. You'll also learn how to use ChatGPT to explore new concepts by asking questions to get detailed explanations that can help you understand complex topics that in a way that's easy to digest.
I've been using ChatGPT probably since November or so when version 3 came out. And I've been testing it in various different situations to see what it can and cannot do. And so today we're going to talk about using it as a study buddy. I've worked in technology long enough to know when I need to rely on it, it fails. And so I decided to record all of the information, but then in session number 1, we ran out of time because the recording, we had such a delay on it that we didn't even get through the content. So I'm going to go to plan, C here, and using a PowerPoint to walk through what I did. And I've put the prompts in the chat. So if you want to follow along and if ChatGPT works for you, feel free to do that. And you can keep that on your own time as well. So I will... I guess I will get started in here, and the first question that we have here is like, what can we use ChatGPT for? But I always like to start with what we cannot use ChatGPT for. We cannot use ChatGPT to learn. We have to be the only ones that can learn. So it cannot do that for you. It is not always the most accurate study buddy, and I believe we have a delay here as well because I'm on screen number 2. All right, stop sharing and share again, see if that happens. It works out. Oh. Oh, I see what's happening. Are you able to see my screen? Because what's happening is that my friend in the top corner here, who I have as a backup, has a freezing system happening. So I can actually not see what you can see. So hopefully, sorry about that. So I'm going to have to just guess on how long it's going to take to come across here. So what ChatGPT cannot do is it's not always accurate. So you have to be careful about that. It can't learn for you. It can't process learning from you, but it can help you articulate the learning that you have. All right, so one thing I thought we would do is, let's try and be careful of using ChatGPT in a way that doesn't plagiarize. So what better way to do that than to ask ChatGPT, how can we use you in a way that doesn't plagiarize? And it said, I'm a great tool. I can be used for brainstorming, proofreading, learning new concepts, practicing conversation skills and writing skills, and I can be used for research. How I use it personally is I use it for writing citations, for finding prominent researchers on a topic, explaining concepts, using it as a thesaurus, creating outlines for paper, and for language translations. What I've learned about research is that it can be good and sometimes it's not. So I'll talk about how I've learned that it works best, and then and how it doesn't work. So we'll get that on the next slide here. But the first one here is, writing citations. I'm a new PhD student. I don't like writing citations. You get all this mess of garbage and you have to turn it into something pretty. And so I just decided to collect all that stuff and have ChatGPT do all that wonderful work for me. And so it turned all those lines of information into a usable citation. Now, sometimes you have to argue with it because it's not always as nice as you want it to be. But it did a pretty good job here. I don't know if that business and media piece needs to be there, but it even put in the DOI, which I don't think that I was in the original document at all. So it found it for me. I do tend to test those though, because again, I can't always trust ChatGPT for doing what it needs to do. So one thing that I learned that I really like about it is that when you have a new topic that you need to research, it can help you find the prominent researchers on that topic. It doesn't list them all, but it does list quite a few. And so I picked cognitive load theory as an example just because we know that's one of the founding theories that we all work in IDT, right? And so, if you do, who are the prominent researchers on cognitive load theory? It should come up with Sweller, Richard Meyer, Jeroen van Melienboer. In the version that I recorded, it added Fred Pass and it added Paul Kirshner as well. But these three tend to always show up. The others, it depends on what it feels like doing. So what I learned is if you go with researchers first, then you can ask it to then give you the most cited articles by that author. But if you were to start with what are the 10 articles I need to read about cognitive load theory, it may give you the right answer, it may not. I've done it a couple of times where the authors are usually correct, but the article titles are, quite frankly, BS. Sometimes they cross each other, which is really funny, but most of the time, the articles don't even exist. And so, or at least not in the libraries that I'm searching on. Virginia Tech has access to a pretty good library. So I always say, start with the researchers first, then ask for the articles. And sometimes those are right, sometimes they're not. What's interesting is that with cognitive load theory is it does come up with these same people over time, but in other topics, it may not. So I ask it the same question over and over and over again, and sometimes I get different answers as to who they are, which is also cool. But I don't know about you, but I've read the article, the 1994 article about cognitive load theory by Sweller, and I think that is the most difficult article I've ever read in my life. He wants me to learn algebra by writing it out, and he's using such complex language that I need a scalpel to dissect it. And so I asked it to to take this sentence alone. This is just one sentence. I have no idea what the sentence means. Just as not all worked examples are effective if cognitive load principles are ignored, so the integration of disparate sources of information can be ineffective if no reference made to cognitive load effects. Please translate, right? So then I had ChatGPT translate this for me, and it kind of helps, but not as well as I would like for it to. And so it's still, there's a lot of text here, a lot of words. And so one thing that I found that helps is if you ask it to explain this to an undergrad, and it'll give you a little bit simpler language. It'll talk about, what cognitive load is, the mental effort required to learn something. If they don't take that into account, then it may not be effective. And then I say, let's make it even easier. Let's ask ChatGPT to explain cognitive load to a 10-year-old. And then it talks about puzzles. And it says puzzles are no fun if they're either too easy or too hard. And learning itself can also be frustrating if it's too easy or too hard. So that's something I can understand as well. So the cognitive load needs to be, like Goldilocks, it needs to be just right. So sometimes I can use ChatGPT to explain concepts to me in more straightforward terms. I don't know about you, but I have the habit sometimes of overusing the same words over and over again. Something can be difficult, different. And in this particular case, I'm using the word optimize. And I actually had ChatGPT generate this terrible writing and have it say, give me the word optimize 4 times in a space here on cognitive load. And it actually overdid itself. It gave me 5 of them. And so then I said, okay, now let's put this as a prompt in for ChatGPT. And say, I would like to use the word optimize less. Let's see what it comes up with when you do that. And so what it did is it changed the words to reduce and manage and improve and facilitate and, create more effective and efficient instructional materials. And so it took the word optimize and only left 1 of them, and then gave me different words, which I liked for it. So, and what's neat about it is that oftentimes when you do that, if you ask it to do something specific, it will take that scalpel and it will change only the part that you want to change. Sometimes it'll totally change what you wrote, but if you say, I just wanted to have less of that one word, it'll try and rework that to where it doesn't really change what you wrote, but it just adds those different words in it. So one thing that I like using it for is for brainstorming. I need to write a paper about something I've never written a paper about. And in this particular case, I used it to help me write a paper on captions. And I said, hey, tell me what topic should go in a paper on captions. Interestingly, the version that I gave it 2 months ago when I had to write this, it was really super long and had lots of little pieces. The versions that I tried in the video the other day gave me much shorter outlines. So it's interesting what it does. But I also learned that if you ask it different ways of doing captions, so, writing a paper, writing a history paper, writing a lit review for captions, if you give it different styles of what it is that you want to write, it'll give you different headings for that. And that's what I liked about it. It talks about the introduction, historical background, research on effectiveness. Another version had the types of captions, benefits of captions, the tools. And then somebody else had, for the history paper, it said early forms of captions, the emergence of closed captions, the advances in technology, etc. So if you ask it the question multiple times in different ways, what you may come up with is your preferred topics on this. And then you can put this together in the way that you want to write the paper. So I like it for brainstorming on that purpose. And then one thing that I like it for, just because I am bilingual, I tested ChatGPT against my native language of Dutch. I wouldn't call it my primary language anymore, but it is my native language. And this is what it came up with. So so this is written in Dutch. En de way that works is Jeroen van Merrienboer is een prominente onderzoeker op het gebied van onderwijs, psychologie en instructieontwerp. And it talks about him being a teacher in Maastricht. So one thing I need you to notice here is that in Maastricht, that the next slide actually includes that Maastricht is in the Netherlands. So I said to ChatGPT, please translate, and it did a really good job of it. It pretty much was a word-for-word translation, and it makes sense in both languages. But it added in the Netherlands in the English version. So that was kind of neat. But then when I did it on the video, it didn't do that. So it's just really interesting to see what ChatGPT does sometimes. Sometimes it'll do extra things, sometimes it doesn't. And we've got quite a few international students in our program. And this would be a really cool way for ChatGPT to have them write their papers in their own language and then use ChatGPT to translate. But again, ChatGPT is great, but don't always trust that it's going to give you what you want. So in the past few minutes here, we have covered different ways on how we can use ChatGPT as a study buddy. You can use it to write citations, to identify prominent researchers, to gain understandings for topics. You can use it as a thesaurus, a brainstorming tool, and as a translator. There are multiple other ways you can use it for. But what ChatGPT is not good at is doing your research for you. Do not rely on it being accurate all the time. It does not provide you with sources for any information that it gives you. And when you ask it to, it won't. It says, I'm a language model, and I'm not going to give you that information. It's also not terribly known for its consistency. But I actually like that because this way it gets to feed my creative juices. So if it comes with a different answer, you know, like another researcher, then that's another person I can go dive into. So I like it for that reason. So I appreciate you very much for coming this afternoon. I hope you found this helpful. And I guess we'll see you in the other room in a whole 5 seconds.
Carmen Lagalante. And she is a doctoral candidate in educational technology at Walden University. And she is going to provide you with 3 different scenarios for using generative AI to help you generate content or to help understand things. So in one situation, she'll talk about letters of recommendation, and imagine that you need to write a letter of recommendation, and how can you use ChatGPT to help? She'll also talk about if you have a lot of data from maybe some surveys. So how could you use Power Query to help you understand your data? And then finally, she'll also give you an example of an advanced computer science course, and your students are struggling to understand something. So you can use ChatGPT and some other tools to help them understand difficult concepts.
Hi, everyone. So in this session, I am a teacher. Besides being a candidate for a PhD at Walden University, I am the educational technology specialist at a high school, and I teach computer science. And my encounters with ChatGPT started in the classroom with one of my students bringing it up to me, because we do every day we do tech news. Not every day, every week we have the tech news where they share, and they were very excited. And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" It was bright. Beautiful. So I'm going to start the session by showing you a tool that is powered by ChatGPT. That's the engine that they use, but it's geared for teachers, especially, you know, K through 12 teachers, I believe, because I don't know anybody else who has to do lesson plans. But the tool is free, although they offer a paid subscription, which I haven't tried. I'm sure it's brilliant. And the link, I think it's in the chat, but I will put it again. And it's just Copilot. And basically, when you ask the question on ChatGPT, it just gives you a text, right? Here, when you ask it, it will give it to you in a formatted version. The best example is Quiz Builder. I tried ChatGPT to give me a quiz. And first, it gave me like 5 multiple choice questions, but no answers. I had to follow it up and say, hey, can you actually give me the answers? Another time I actually wanted a free response, and it didn't get, you know, and it gave me multiple choice. I had to keep asking it. Right here, Quiz Builder, you can say, okay, linear question. quiz. And it's right here. Do I want multiple choice? Fill in the blank. Okay, some of it you have to pay for it more, but you can see generate. And then you can export it. It's really nice. But it can do more stuff. It can do, I like the idea generator, or I mean, writing prompts. Because if I ask ChatGPT, it gives me good ideas, but I still have to reformat it in a way that the students know what I want them to do. Well, if I ask here, and I say, hey, give me writing prompts, it will write them in a way that my high school student can read the question and know what I want them to write an essay on, or have a discussion, actually use them for a discussion. I don't do a lot of essays in computer science, but I do like flip grades, or what now they call it, flip. And you'll see in a minute. And actually you can go on the history and you can see all the writing prompts. So, all right, it's not, this is everything I asked it before. Here we go. Oh, that was the test. That was the PowerPoint. It made a whole PowerPoint. I don't know why I can't find the writing prompts now. All right, well, let's go back to it, because I want you to see the difference. Oh, I have to try. Right, while that's doing, I'll go to ChatGPT because I don't want to waste time, but you'll see the difference. Now in ChatGPT, I use it for many things, but one of them is to write, I find it very helpful to write letters of recommendation. But the way I do it, because I still want to be ethical. I mean, the student has asked me because I know them. So I want to make sure this letter is not some generic letter, but that it shows that I know this student. So this is what I told him: write a letter of recommendation for a student in my computer science class. I taught him for 3 years. Not necessarily the best grades, but very creative. He was very persistent, very kind, overcome serious drawbacks, and made a great Pac-Man game. And it gave me this beautiful letter, which would have taken me so long, and I probably wouldn't write it quite this nice. Confidently, they possess exceptional qualities, achieve the highest grades in computer, but their unwavering persistence and creativity in finding solutions have truly impressed me. And it's true, you know, he got a B in the class, but his answers were always so different, and I loved it. I loved how his brain worked. With a unique perspective, often breast fresh, you know, and I mean, this could also be letters of recommendation for a colleague or something, you know, but in my world, it's usually letters of recommendation. And if this is too long, you know, you can say, hey, Chat, can you make it a little shorter? That's too much. And he rewrote it. Based on the outstanding creativity and problem solving, I have full confidence will continue to excel and make significant contributions. It's so true. But it saves so much time. I took it from here, put it on Word, you know, added a few little details here and there. It was extremely helpful. Another one that I used it for was to summarize some of those contracts. You know, every time you sign to an app or whatever, you're signing, you're agreeing to things, and most of us don't have the time to read it. I certainly don't. And for this, I did have to use ChatGPT 4 because 3 told me that it was too much, that it couldn't read that much. But I took the contract, I copy and pasted all that small print, and he told me, by checking this box, this is what I'm agreeing to. Boom, boom, boom. So much better. I signed far more confidently than I usually do. Also, it's been great for differentiating instruction. Again, I teach computer science. I had a student, he's really struggling with a question. I'm showing him the answer. I'm explaining the answer to the best I could, and he just wasn't getting it. And I said, guess what? Let's see what ChatGPT says. I copied and pasted the answer, and I said, hey, can you explain this? And look, step by step, and the student totally followed it. I know this, if you don't teach coding, this means nothing to you, but it made sense to the student. But if the student didn't get it, I could have said, hey, can you regenerate another one? And explains it again, you know, with breaking it out more. Some kids are more visual, right? Some kids are less visual. It can differentiate, and it will never get tired of explaining things. It's the same facts, the same content. Another thing that I do at the school besides teaching is I do a lot of and helping the teachers. I also manage the database, and I have to do reports, and I do a lot of Excel, and sometimes I don't know how to do things, and I just learned about Power Query. So You can go on YouTube and watch videos. Like you should see the difference. Okay, I'm going to ask YouTube the exact same question. Should have done this earlier. Well, it's gotten smarter, but usually you just get a bunch of links, right? And you have to see which one might say all right to me. While it literally just did it step by step. Saved me so much time. I asked it all kinds of stuff for my dissertation. I asked for how to do stuff. This was debugging. This was the student put their code. This with me. I was guiding them. I said, use it to your advantage. Don't cheat. But you have your code. You spend 30 minutes or 45 minutes trying to figure out why it's not working. So I said, can you debug this code? I put in the student code. This was a big project, so it was quite a bit of code. But it said it, look, I think you got this wrong, and I think this is a typo here. And they just fixed it, and the student was so happy. So I think it's really important to give them this, not to block it, but to teach them to use it as a help, because it's going to be there. You know, it's going to be there, I think, from now on. I'll stop sharing, but I'll have to tell you another one was I went on Canva. We have a Canva for Education, and I had to do a presentation. I had to do a PowerPoint, and I didn't know they had already put an AI in there. And when it gave me the theme, right, that I wanted, it matched it perfectly to what I was writing. It wanted to write it for me. I didn't want it to write it for me. But then at one point, I needed a picture. My presentation was on virtual reality, and I'm like, what does a volcano look like if you're looking at it through the VR? And of course, they couldn't find me that image, but right there, they had already added the text to image. And I said, well, you can't find the image here. Put the text. And he made it for me, and he made exactly what I wanted. And I want the students to have access to that as well. You know, it's not writing the PowerPoint for you, although Copilot does do that a little bit. But this one was more the images and the graphics, and it saves so much time that I would have gone on Google to try to find a picture that I needed when it just drew it for me. When I knew exactly what I wanted. In my mind, I knew, because I've played the game. I knew what I wanted to look like. And let me look at the chat because I don't see it. Is any questions? They were good. Okay. Oh, I never went back to, okay, let's go back. You can see I use ChatGPT a lot. And Copilot here. Here was the, I don't know what happened here. Sorry. I did show you this. I did go back. Okay. Let's go back to workshop. The quiz builder, I think to get the more than 5 questions, you do have to pay for that. But the project generator, oh, that was another great one. Project ideas. I hate to give tests. If I don't have to, I won't. So I said linear equations, project based learning. Oh, and I forgot to put the 9th grade. Oops. Oh, it's already doing it. I don't know if we're going to have time, but it does. Yeah, here we go. And this project students will use it to solve real world problems. Okay. Project outline will be given a, oh, this one didn't do a good job. Okay. Last time it did much better. It's because I shouldn't put linear equations project. I should just say that. It's all about the prompts. Okay. Did it do it? Yes. Here we go. Oh, this one's still, oh. I guess it did better with arrays, but you get the idea of it. Okay. Now I went too fast, so. I use it a lot for coding, but it's the output and explains it, especially because it can explain things. You're free to unmute if you have any questions.
I love it for coding and for checking code.
Yeah.
I'm doing a Raspberry Pi camp, right? I'm about to do a Raspberry camp in a couple of weeks. And I was like, what do I do? So I just said, create a Raspberry Pi camp, junior high level. And then I'm just asking you for each one of those prompts to help me out.
Yeah.
But I haven't used the Copilot before. I've written a lot of questions though in the other ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It's written pretty good questions.
Yeah.
But I found that I was going to use Copilot a little bit, but I like in ChatGPT, I just say write 10 questions at a time before it craps out on me. But
yeah. What I like about Copilot is that it's already formatted in a way they can, they will read them. So that's been the one advantage. But obviously it's ChatGPT at its basis. And I actually tried at one point asking exactly the same question to both. And it's very similar. It was just all about the formatting and the context that it built to it.
Well, it's interesting because I wonder if Copilot's just using a single connection to the API, it would also be building that prompt to Copilot instead of you. So it'd be interesting to see how that works. So thank you. That was a great presentation. Thank you. I'll have to watch some of the other ones too.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I went too fast this time. I keep running out of time.
There's a lot to cover.
I know. I'm like, 15 minutes. But thank you for your time.
And then finally, Stephen Salik is a clinical assistant professor of learning design and technologies in the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University. And he is going to share some of the things from his LDT 511, Emerging Trends and Technologies of Learning Design. And he's going to demonstrate how students are being taught to explore generative AI as a tool for rapidly creating types of learning objects. He'll also talk about other technologies beyond ChatGPT, like DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, Amazon Poly, and some other kinds of tools, so that you can use lots of different AI to help you create learning objects.
Hey everybody, our time is limited, so I'm just going to get started right away. Thumbs up if you can hear me, or just a yes if you can hear me.
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm Steve Salik. I'm a clinical assistant professor at the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University. I've been at Arizona State University in varying capacities since dinosaurs roamed the earth. I was formerly the director of online academic services for the W.P. Carey School of Business. And I've worked in various capacities in digital learning since the beginning of time, since we got digits. So today we're going to talk about how we're exploring generative AI as a content development tool, not only from an instructional perspective, but from a perspective of where we're trying to enculturate our students to use these tools and materials, because it will eventually end up being part of their professional practice. So let me get started here. So the Learning Design and Technologies program, formerly known as Instructional Design at ASU, our main program is a Masters of Ed program, and we have several other companion programs. And the reason I want to go through this is it kind of situates why we're exploring these things in the way we do. So we have a certificate program. It's a 5-course program that awards students it's a public-facing certificate program. So they get a learning design certificate out of that. We're also working on a large grant with MasterCard Foundation across several countries in Africa. And what we're doing there is we're delivering a certificate program to educators in the African higher education system. Our current cohort is 100% of them are based in Ethiopia. The last cohort was based all across different countries. And these people are mostly already PhDs. This was spurred on by COVID and the realization across the continent that they needed to really begin to think seriously about delivering things online. And then finally, we have an undergraduate concentration. So the rationale, the reason we're exploring these things is we're exploring them from several angles. The first thing is course materials, which is how can we use generative AI as faculty members to increase the efficacy of our instruction. And the example I would give you here is we have an evaluation course. The students pose or assume the role of an external evaluation team and evaluate a existing instructional program as they would if they were external evaluators. The problem with this course has always been is that we've had quite a bit of difficulty figuring out how to get them to generate qualitative data. So now we're able to generate qualitative data using ChatGPT, and they have a better end-to-end experience because now they're able to analyze a variety of different types of data. We tinkered around with it, and we found, much to our chagrin, that ChatGPT knew about the programs we have them evaluating. So we generally start off a session with ChatGPT saying something like, for the following questions, assume that it's based on this program, and then ChatGPT generates qualitative data that's relevant to that program. How can we incorporate these tools instruction into our own course development process as we develop new tools at the Mary Lou Fulton School? Our courses are not fixed. They are renewed almost every semester. Things change in them. They are in a state of what we call constant improvement. We also had another faculty member raise some ideas about idea generation. How can we use these generative AI tools to help us explore different kinds of ideas that we might want to pursue as instructors for instruction? And finally, probably the most important thing is professional practice. Our students are going out into organizational instructional design practice or higher ed practice, and how can they leverage these tools to develop their own content objects and things. Some advantages and disadvantages of Pro AI, you're probably familiar with all of these. It's fast to use. You don't have to agonize and sit there writing a script for a whole afternoon. It can do it within a few seconds. It reduces development time. By that, I mean, you don't have to, spend hours in Photoshop developing an image, for example. If you word your prompt well enough, you're going to get something that's close to spot on. Because of our experiences with our African students, something that's become more and more of a factor for us to explore is contextualization. How can we contextualize our content for different audiences? An example here would be in the traditional instructional design class, the design case is that students have to design a 3-module unit of instruction about teaching faculty members how to podcast. Our Ethiopian students don't have access to those types of technology, so that wouldn't have worked for them. So what we did was we contextualize it, and they have to create a 3-lesson module of instruction on creating Doro Wat, which is the national dish of Ethiopia. And we very specifically chose that thing because we knew that there would be elders in their village or family members or somebody who could act as a subject matter expert for them. The cons are there's bias built into AI. There are plenty of books about this if you're interested. Sometimes AI is going to hallucinate, so you should fact check. And then along with the bias thing, there are some culturally biased elements. So in terms of contextualization, I just brought this up as kind of a silly example. And, depending on where your instruction is going, whether it's for a higher ed audience or an organizational audience, your visuals are going to want to align with your objectives in your audience. So this is just kind of a silly example I picked out of DALL-E. We have a rapid design exercise where they have to design a quick module on preparing a latte, a cafe latte. It's kind of like a pre-test kind of exercise. So these are 3 different images based on different DALL-E prompts. So it's show me a barista making a latte in the style of Rembrandt, in the style of Monet, and in the style of Keith Haring. And it's just an illustration of how by manipulating the prompt in these artificial intelligence, these generative AI tools, you can get different results. The same thing goes really for text-based content. And while I'm calling it text-based content, I'm also talking about things that you would use and process as scripts for videos or things like that. So I asked ChatGPT to define instructional design, and this is what it gave me. But as I said, there are a lot of contextual differences because 15% of our students at this point are overseas beyond our work with African cohorts. So what we also wanted to know was how would this manifest itself in an African context, and ChatGPT provided this example of how a lot of the definition of instructional design, just instructional design itself, is rooted in cultural differences and the diversity of the continent in Africa. So this provides an example of how these tools can be used.
That water, I'm thinking about that watermelon water in the fridge.
Different types of contextualization. And then
Go outside,
finally, what I want to do is I want to show you an example of what one of our students produced, just to see how these things can be stitched together from a learning design content perspective. So this particular student has been an environmental journalist for years. He came back to ASU to get his MED because he wanted to take his environmental activism and turn it into learning. So he created this little video using, are you not going to play? Okay, he created this video by using ChatGPT, DALL-E, and Amazon Polly, and stitching it all together. So I'm going to, let's see here. So I'm going to try to get the sharing going here because my computer doesn't want to seem to play it in the PowerPoint slide. And what he did was he wrote the script in ChatGPT. He created all of the images in DALL-E and stitched them together in a panorama. And then he used Amazon Polly, the neural AI voices in Amazon Polly to do the narration.
Increasingly rare in the tropical rainforests of Southeast Asia. According to experts, there may be less than 2,000 bears left in the wild. The majority of the Malayan sun bear's forest habitat has been destroyed by logging and conversion to agriculture. As natural food sources disappear due to the logging, sun bears are driven by hunger to forage.
So that is my overview of how we're exploring these technologies and what they're using for at ASU. Sorry for talking too fast, but our time is really limited in this session. So if we have a minute or two left, I'll take any questions you may have. Thank you, and a shout out to Dr. Giacomo.
Hey there.
Questions?
Hey, this is Yael. I had a quick question about like the use of the ChatGPT and DALL-E and everything like that. How does the integration work? Like, is it cumbersome? Is it an easy lift? Anything like that?
Right now, we're not doing any integration with APIs or anything like that. We're using it all manually. So we'll generate scripts and then we will move them just by cut and paste wherever we need to move them. How the students do it is entirely up to the students. Our students are capable with technology, but I wouldn't call them technology geniuses.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked a question about what is Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion is another image generation tool. It's very, very similar to DALL-E. You go in there and you give it a prompt and it'll create whatever image you ask it for.
Hi, Steve. Do you have any suggestion for audio? If you can, is there any tool, generative AI tools for audio generation?
So I have seen some generative tools. So I have seen a variety of different generative tools. So one of my students recently completed her applied project using a tool called Synesthesia. And what you do is you plug in a text script, and then it creates an avatar and syncs the lips with the script. So was it effective? It was okay. There was a certain element of creepiness to it because it was like this computer-generated person with a computer-generated voice, and syncing the lips, wasn't perfect 100% of the time, but it really provided a lot of insight as to the potential of these tools as they continue to develop. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah, there are some generative tools for music in AI. Honestly, I have not tried any of those yet. Other questions? Yes, Tian, that is the correct tool. And again, it's all about, the results you get are all about refining your prompt and being as specific as you can. So we have experimented with some scripts where we have said things like in the style, provide a 3-paragraph script about editing audio in the style of Stephen King. We're just these oddly, seemingly contradictions just to see what happens. And some of them have been fun, but basically we're just trying to experiment and get the students to think beyond sitting down in Photoshop and just doing everything manually, because those times for learning design are rapidly coming to a close.
Steve, I had another question about the ethics, because sometimes when these image generation tools, they use the existing images from internet, and they do not credit those sources. So what are the ethical issues that comes with the multimedia generative AI models?
So there are potentially a boatload of issues that come with that, and we have internally, for those, there's a working group, I guess you would call it, within our college where we're discussing that. And what we've settled on at this point is when we credit the things, it's something like created by Steve Salik with the assistance of Stable Diffusion. So we're also crediting the tool, but that's something, frankly, that remains to be worked out. There are ongoing lawsuits at the moment because some people from DeviantArt, which is a large internet-based art website, that their work was sampled by some of these tools without their permission. So their perspective is they're losing money, they're losing revenue because people can produce art that looks like theirs and then not consult them. So I'm sure this will all continue to be a problem for some time, because copyright and credit, that is a particularly sticky situation, especially when you're talking about generative AI and only, is it in the style of a person, is it using some of that person's actual images? It's for the lawyers to decide, but generally our approach is to credit the tool also when we build something with it. Dr. Giacomo, any questions?
Yeah, what kind of assignments are you having students do? Are you having students doing assignments that compares like the outputs of the AI with, like, say, their own outputs?
We are actually talking about those particular kinds of assignments and trying to figure out how we would make that work. At this point, what they're being asked to do are create, we're just loosely calling them rapid content objects. So they have to use generative AI, something that generates scripts. So generally, for most of them, they choose ChatGPT, something to generate imagery, and something to generate narration. So it has to be all stitched together in whatever form they choose. They may, I don't know, produce all the assets and then stitch it together in Premiere or Rush.
Okay, so we have everyone back. And that was a whirlwind for a Friday afternoon. So please do remember, we will be sending out the recording of all 6 presenters. I do just want to take a moment to thank Heather Boyd, Chelsie, Dubay, Mike Frazier, Vianne Greek, Carmen Lagalante, and Steve Salik for sharing their experiences with us today. We do have one more session coming up next Friday. This one will be in the evening at 7 p.m. We have Matt Bauer from, I just forgot what university in Australia, and Ted Frick from Indiana University, and our own president of ACT, David Wiley, closing out the session from Lumen Learning. So I hope you will join us there. I will put the link to the place to sign up. Oops, that's not the right link. Let me try that again. I'll put that in the chat where you can sign up for part 3. I'll also put in the link for recording of part 1. And then you should also receive an email next week with a link to the recording from part 2. And we will also have the resources from each of the presenters will be attached to the recording as well. And with that, thank you, Macri University. Thank you, Jinjoy. So with that, I really appreciate your time on a Friday afternoon, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you next Friday evening.